Good afternoon from Oxford, or morning or evening, from whichever part of the world you're dialing into today. We'll also be recording this session. So for anybody who has signed up and unable to join us, we will be sending out a recording both to everybody who is listening in this afternoon and also for those unable to listen in. So it's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. My name is Amy Major. I'm MBA Recruitment Manager here at the school. And I'm also joined by my colleague, Charlotte. Charlotte, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Charlotte Kelshiker, and I am one of the admissions advisors. So should you choose to apply, then I'm a member of the team that will assess your application in the first instance.
So again, thank you for joining us. Obviously, today we're really here to talk about application tips, which will really go over, what you really need to do to make a strong application. And also, most importantly, what needs to go into that application to make that complete. We'll also be covering off the deadlines, maybe perhaps some tips around benefits, around when you might apply. And also just we'll have a couple of introductory slides that might just provide a little bit of context to Saïd Business School in the context of the University of Oxford. You might have seen that we also have other webinars coming up, so we would definitely recommend listening in for our more broader information session webinars, because today is very much focused on application tips. Please do send through questions as you think of them, but obviously I would urge you to probably wait a little bit until we're getting further into the presentation, because there might be things that are covered that you're thinking of. So we will get going, and then we will absolutely have time for the Q&A at the end. It probably comes as no surprise to you all on here that there are a lot of people dialed in, so we will probably receive duplicate questions. There may be some questions which might be quite particular to an individual, and if we feel those are inappropriate to answer on the actual webinar, we will respond to those individually thereafter we have a copy of all the questions that come through. So without further ado, I will start by introducing Charlotte's skipping ahead with my slides there. So I think, really just to sort of give some context to this application that you might be making. So for anybody who is not aware, Saïd Business School is a department of the University of Oxford. So if you think of when you studied your undergrad and you studied within the economics department or you studied within the chemistry department, Saïd Business School is very much that. It is a standalone department. Think of it as a subsidiary of this holding company, which is the University of Oxford. So much of your MBA time, in fact, all of your MBA will be taught and studied within the business school. But we show you this slide here. It's probably what you think of when you Google image Oxford University. You have a membership as an MBA to one of the Oxford colleges of the wider University of Oxford. And we show you this as this is a very unique offering that obviously Oxford and a few other institutions globally have to offer. You join both the business school and the university. So when you are considering different schools and also considering, how you might focus your application, you are joining not just a standalone business school, but a wider university community. And here is the business school itself. So for anybody who hasn't seen what the business school looks like, we are located right next door to the Oxford train station. So we're an hour from London. So I would say for anybody who's looking to apply and wants to visit, you may have seen our campus visit form on our website where you can request a visit to campus. We also have a big open house event coming up on the 23rd of August. So we would more than welcome all of you there. And you will see that over the coming sort of weeks, there'll be more and more in-country information events coming up around the globe. Particularly our sort of hectic and busy travel period will run from August through till sort of December. So really sort of capturing those first 3 application rounds. If there's not something featuring in your region just yet, just keep checking back. I would also recommend at this point in time that you should look to download the MBA brochure. If you ensure that you tick yes to marketing preferences, you will be added to all of our communications, newsletters, and briefings with application updates. So as well as listening in today, which is absolutely shows you're doing all the right things, I really recommend making sure that you are receiving all of our updates. You'll then get to hear about events, etc. I think with that, we will start to move on to a little bit more about what does our sort of MBA class look like and who do we attract. So I think it's important for you to know who we attract when you're considering, am I the right type of applicant? Am I the right type of person? Is my background correct? And I think what this shows is that the class profile here at Saïd is incredibly diverse. And there is also what this doesn't show you is it's also very diverse when it comes to background. So not only the corners of the globe that people come from, but the career backgrounds, the education backgrounds that they bring to the cohort. We always aim to have a class of around 320 students, so that isn't changing. And perhaps we'll come on to it more in the application deadlines, but we don't admit a certain number of students per application round. I think that's important to stress. We also aren't looking to have a certain percentage of people from certain parts of the globe. So don't think, oh, I'm from Singapore, I can't apply till stage 3. Does that mean that too many people from Singapore have been admitted in stage 1 or 2? To have 63 nationalities, we are just looking to bring together the best possible group of people. And by every year, without us trying to manipulate that in any way, it always ends up around 60 nationalities by just by chance. And typically always very international. We absolutely really love to have, British UK nationals here in the programme, but we are well aware that an MBA is a truly global degree and therefore does attract a very, very diverse population of people to the programme. Again, looking at female participation, as you probably are all aware, this is a big focus for any organisation, company, university, school, whatever kind of, wherever you think of in the world. And it's something that Saïd is very focused on. We're really happy to report that this coming cohort that will start in this September is looking to be somewhere between the 42 to 43% mark. So this is something that we are focused on as a school. However, we are not looking to positively discriminate. We are very much looking at the merit of the candidate. So do not feel as a woman that you're applying and you're therefore getting an easier chance of admission because you're a woman, or if you're a man that you're in any way disadvantaged. It is very much down to the merit of your application. Coming on to work experience, what I would stress is that is a word average there. So do not get fixated if you have 2-3 years experience or if you have 10 years experience that you don't fit and therefore this isn't the right programme for you. What is most important is that you are able to show the admissions committee that it's the right time for you and that you have reached this right stage of your career that the MBA now makes sense, that it is part of your story and part of your journey, and it appears to come across to the admissions committee as the absolute next step in your career. Obviously, there does come a point where somebody may be too junior, and I would really urge you to consider if it is the right time. If you are bringing between that 1 to 3 years, you do need to consider if it's a little bit too early. And also if you're reaching probably close to 15 years experience or above, depending on the strength of your leadership experience, the executive MBA might start to make sense. Again, that very much comes down to the level of leadership experience you bring. And with the GMAT, I'm sure we'll talk about this some more on the coming slides, and I'm sure we'll have many questions about GMAT or GRE, I should add. But the median of the current cohort is around the 690 mark. And again, that's a median. So we are recommending a score above 650 with which to apply. In GMAT terms, we'll talk more about the GRE as we move on. But again, that is a median. It's not the expected. There will be people applying with absolutely 700 to up to the highest score of 800, and there will be people being admitted in the more mid 600 range. hopefully that gives you a flavour. If you're thinking, am I the right type of person? Could I go to Oxford? Hopefully I might have allayed a few fears there. So. Great, so application deadlines. So really, I would say, so we have 4 deadlines in which you can apply. And my general advice to anybody I speak to is that really, if you are putting forward what could be deemed a strong or robust application that could grant you admission, your chances are roughly equal across stage 1 to stage 3. It is really only in stage 4 where you are really being maybe a little bit more considered against the applicant that might be next to you on the interview day, for example. In stage 1 to 3, if you have a strong application, we will make you an offer. In stage 4, we have a limited number of offers typically available left to make. In both the last 2 application cycles, so 2019 and 2018, we have ended with a wait list in both of these cycles. So that is enough evidence for us that that seems to be the way our application numbers are tracking, and therefore we would really recommend applying in one of those first 3 stages. What is absolutely paramount is that you do not apply until you have what you feel is the best possible application and meets those requirements. And your application, Charlotte will come on a little bit more to the requirements, but your application has to be complete and it has to be in full. There are very, very little kind of rooms for manoeuvre in terms of waivers for certain requirements, etc. And we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. One could argue that the quality of applicants applying in stage 1 is quite high. We have a blank canvas. We're starting the cohort from afresh. So I would say a good example here might be, let's just say you've got a great application, you've scored a 650 GMAT, which is, you know, our sort of recommended score, but you think you could achieve more and you would like to retake it again, then retake it and apply in stage 2. Your chances of admission will probably go up by having a higher GMAT score. You'll probably have an application that is a little bit more fully complete and something that you're more happy with. So really do not be obsessed with having to apply as early as possible. Obviously, it is recommendable to apply by that stage 3 for eligibility for scholarships and also potentially for a choice of Oxford College. I think that's where it's worth listening into the information session webinars. We'll go into a bit more detail about how the college experience affects your experience here in Oxford. Is there anything else you'd add about the application deadlines?
Yeah, I think I really would agree with Amy's advice there around applying when you feel you're in the position to apply with the strongest possible application you can put together. And if that means missing out on stage 1 and going into stage 2, then great, do that, make a plan. Certainly stages 1, 2 and 3 broadly similar in terms of competitiveness. And as Amy has already mentioned, you absolutely need to make sure you apply by the stage 3 deadline and your application must be complete by then in order to be considered for the widest possible number of scholarships, because it's the January deadline upon which the University of Oxford closes its scholarship competitions. So if we admit you to the programme, of course, we will consider you for Oxford Said scholarships that we control here at the school. But if you're admitted in one of the first 3 stages, you'll also be considered for all of the pots of money available across the wider university. And given that the university offers scholarships, full scholarships to over 1,000 graduate students every year, then certainly it's worth being, I would say, in with a shout to secure one of those for your MBA costs. So shall we move on and look at application requirements? So here we are. This is what we need you to provide us with by one of those deadlines that we've just walked through. So just to visit those in turn, unsurprisingly, you need to have an undergraduate degree. And as Amy's already alluded to, the class here is very diverse, and that's not only in terms of nationality and geographical location, but also that accounts for your academic background. So we do not insist, for example, that you have read for a particularly quantity undergraduate degree. You don't have to be a fantastic mathematician in order to join the MBA cohort here at Oxford Said. You need to have studied an undergraduate degree and done reasonably well. We're looking for a UK 2-1, that's upper second class, or the international equivalent. And on that note, please don't worry about having to go out and get a statement of equivalency from NARIC or any of the qualification agencies. You don't need to do that. All you need to do when you apply is upload your degree transcripts. So that's your full mark sheets as opposed to your degree certificate. And that shows us a level of granularity around exactly what you've studied and how you've performed on each module or option that you've taken throughout your study. And we will convert your degree classification over to the UK system. So it could be that your particular country or university marking system gives you perhaps a letter of the alphabet, or it might be expressed in a percentage or in Greek letters. Don't worry, we do the conversion as part of our due diligence when we process your application. But suffice to say, whether you've read history or music or medicine or accounting and finance, you are equally welcome to apply to our MBA programme. So moving on to the standardised test score, as Amy's already mentioned, we welcome either the GMAT or GRE, and we honestly have no preference in terms of which test you take. They will broadly inform us equally with regards to what we feel is your ability to undertake the class and perform pretty well across all of the subjects that we teach. The beauty of a standardised test like GMAT or GRE is that it's not just testing your quantitative ability, it's not just testing your verbal ability and not just your comprehension ability or your ability to reason well or formulate an argument. It's testing all of these things. So we're looking for a fairly balanced scorecard across the board. GMAT, yes, a score that's north of 650 is to be encouraged and aimed for. In terms of GRE, which doesn't have a total score, thinking about quantum verbal components, would recommend a score of about 161 in both would be great. That would put you broadly in line with a 650 GMAT. If your scorecard is slightly out of whack, don't worry. We're not looking for absolute equilibrium across the board, but we are looking to see that you're not an out-and-out quantitative genius, but your verbal scores are very, very poor, you know, only in the 10th percentile, let's say. That's extreme, but we are looking for a rounded individual to join the class here. Like I say, it just shows us that you'll be able to cope with whatever we throw at you academically. That's the plan. We are also looking for professional experience, and I know that Amy's already spoken in some detail about the kind of experience that we welcome in terms of longevity. At least 2 or 3 years full-time experience is ideal, and like we say on the slide, the class, we tend to see the rump, if you like, of experience around 5 to 6 years out from university. But if you have only been working for a couple of years and you've shown stellar performance in your chosen career and you've shown great progression, maybe you've had some international experience or some management experience under your belt, or worked on some really interesting projects that have challenged you, or maybe you've been setting up your own endeavour and that's been going great, then you might be at the lower end of the experience range, but we'd still want to meet you potentially and understand more about you as a prospective candidate. But whichever end of the spectrum you're at, you need to distill all of your experience down to a one-page CV. That's what we're expecting to see on your application. There is a template available on our website and also on the application system should you wish to use it, but you are under no obligation to do so. It just happens to be the template that our careers team work with here at the school. So it's a format that we'll probably ask you to work with when you are here as a student. But like I say, you can upload your own CV as long as it's just the one page long. Turning to references, you are asked to register 2 individuals to act as referees to support your application. And these should be people who can really sell you to us. These are not character references. These are references that can really speak to your ability to gain an MBA and also to be able to use the experience to advance in your career and in your personal growth. So we're not here looking for references from wildly impressive job title holders, but we are looking for references that are good quality and fulsome and honest and will really tell us about you and your strengths and your weaknesses and how long they've known you for and why they think that you'd be a great MBA candidate. So it doesn't have to, for example, just be your line manager. It could be, that's absolutely fine and quite normal. It could be a client who you have delivered quite a lot of work for and worked closely with on projects in the past. They probably know what makes you tick and your working style quite well. It could be a peer or a colleague. If you are more recently graduated, just a couple of years out from university, and you have kept in touch with particular academics from your school and they understand your professional trajectory having graduated, then potentially an academic reference might be something for you to consider. But the norm is certainly 2 professional references. One tip here, when you start your online application for the MBA, make one of your very first tasks to navigate to the reference section and register your referee's details. And what that does is shoot off an email to your referee telling them how to go about answering a very few brief questions about you, but also how to upload their letter of recommendation. And they can be working on that while you are finessing the rest of your application. So I think it's courteous to give your referee plenty of time to make sure that they can submit the reference in time to hit the deadline. Because not only is that when your application has to be complete, but it's also when the references need to have been submitted. So register your referees early. And if you have got someone in mind to be your referee, talk to them in advance. Let them know that you would love them to be your referee. See how they feel about that. And if they are positive, then get them registered soon after you start your application. We ask you also to write a supporting statement as part of your application. Now, this is a short essay of just 250 words, and it's really saying, well, what else do you want the committee to know about you that isn't covered somewhere else on the application? Now, this is a golden opportunity for you to, again, sell yourself to us. Tell us something interesting, either about what you do at work or in your free time or about your background. It could be a particular accomplishment. It could be a challenge that you've overcome. It could be addressing a weakness in your application head on to show us that you're really self-aware, you're switched on, you know it's less than ideal, but you have all of these other strengths that potentially could help compensate for that chink in your armour. So think how you could use that supporting statement to just tell us something more about yourself. You'll see that I'm skirting around the icon here called video assessment, and that's because I'm going to explore that on a separate slide next. So in lieu of video assessment, before we talk about English language, I'd like to talk about career progression just briefly, because this is another mandatory part of the application form. It's a fairly lengthy section, quite reflective group of questions that ask you to think about yourself out of the MBA program. You've come out the other end, you're freshly minted MBA. What does your professional landscape look like? What job will you be heading towards or hopefully have already secured while you're here on course? Are you going to be working for yourself? Are you going to be working for another organisation? Is it large, small? What sector? What territory? What kind of actual job function or role are you going to be fulfilling? And why are you the right person for that pathway? Convince us that your ambition is rational and reasonable and achievable, and that an MBA is really crucial and a positive step, if you like, along that development pathway. So let's talk about the English language proficiency icon just briefly, because as Amy's already mentioned, the class is really, really international. So quite a lot of you might be listening thinking, oh gosh, I might need to take a language test. Well, yes, some of you will, and some of you won't. So even though this is covered in great detail on our website, I will just walk you through some of the scenarios to help you understand whether you will need to supply us with a language test result. So you're going to have to supply a test result at the point you apply if your first language is not English, or if your first language is English, but you're not a national of a majority English-speaking country recognised by the UK VI. That's the UK Visas and Immigration. So you might have grown up in an English-speaking house in India, let's say, but India is not officially a majority English-speaking country. So in theory, you would have to take an English language test. There's a list of countries on our website that are deemed to be majority English speaking, so you can check against that. But before you forge ahead and take your language test, I'll just explore with you now waivers that we offer to the English language proficiency test requirement. And we will waive the requirement if you meet the following criteria. If you have studied for a degree that's lasted for at least one academic year, so a full 9 months in other words, and it was taught and studied for, and you took examinations in English throughout. So if that's you, if you have completed a degree that was taught entirely in English, then you will be able to be considered for a waiver. And to be considered for a waiver, all you have to do is to either upload your degree transcript, because quite often degree transcripts say language of instruction on them, or we'll be able to see that the degree was clearly taught in an English-speaking country like Australia or the USA, or you can upload a letter from your university that just confirms the language of instruction or medium of instruction for your degree was English throughout. So a couple of permissible waiver scenarios. Let's say you're an Indian student, you went to university in India, but your degree was taught entirely in English. You can apply for a waiver, upload your transcript, or obtain an appropriate letter from your university and upload that. Let's say you're a Japanese student and you went to university in Singapore. Now, Singapore is not a majority English-speaking country, but let's say you went to NUS and your degree was taught entirely in English. You too can be considered for a waiver. What you'll need to do is upload your NUS degree transcript that will confirm that your degree was taught entirely in English. Third scenario, let's say you're a Chinese student and you went off and did a bachelor's degree in the USA. Again, you meet the terms of a waiver, so just upload your degree transcript. We will see you studied in the States and all is well. Be warned, for those of you who have done your degree in a non-majority English-speaking country, or your degree was not taught in English, but let's say you spent a year abroad, maybe you were even a visiting student here at Oxford, you do not qualify for a waiver. Your entire degree needs to have been taught in English, not just an exchange semester or some study abroad. Now, there are 4 tests that we accept for English language. We accept IELTS, we accept the internet-based TOEFL. We also, from this year, will be accepting the Cambridge Certificate of Proficiency in English and also the Cambridge Certificate of Advanced English. In terms of the minimum standards that we look for, those test scores are on our website. Just very briefly, IELTS 7.5 overall, TOEFL 110 overall, and both the CPE and the CAE 191 overall. Now, there are also minimum component scores that you need to hit. So make sure, if you think you are going to have to take a test, make sure you check what those minimum scores are, because you have to have met the standards when you apply. So we expect to see test score results on your MBA application showing us that you've already met Oxford's standards. And you have to have taken a test in the 2 years before your MBA program starts. So if you're applying for the MBA that starts next September, your test result needs to have been taken within the 2 years prior to that. Okay, let's move on and explore the video assessments, which we're very excited about because they are new for us this year.
And we've just filmed all of the questions, so we are nearly ready to go.
We have, and when you start your applications, you will get to see both Amy and I entertaining you with our video questions. So it's nothing to get worried about. That is my first piece of advice. Please don't worry. It's extremely common across business schools to ask you to provide a small video-based submission as part of your MBA application. In fact, one could argue that Oxford is really playing catch-up here because a lot of the elite schools have been doing this for some time. And increasingly, a lot of employers are using video technology platforms to help recruit for jobs. So if this is new to you, it certainly won't be new to you in the next year or so, because more and more employers are using similar technology when they're starting to meet prospective job holders for the first time. So you'll see on your MBA application, when you start to complete it, there will be a link out to our video assessment partner provider, which is a company called Kira Talent. You'll receive an email from Kira Talent that gives you instructions and provides you a link so that you can see the platform and start to experiment and practice and get yourself ready to submit your short video answers. It's worth mentioning that it is very important that you do commit your final takes of your videos to the system by the application deadline. So it's just as mandatory as your GMAT, it's just as mandatory as uploading your CV on time or your transcript or getting your references in. So what will you see when you register with Kira? First thing that you will watch is a video that our Associate Dean, Kathy Harvey, has recorded for us, which welcomes you to the school and lifts the lid on the culture and ethos and the way that we teach here at Oxford Side. It's a very welcoming video, it's very illuminating, and it's a great first contact with Kathy, who is the Associate Dean for the MBA programme here. So she will welcome you first of all. And then you have unlimited opportunity to practice with the video platform. So there's a whole host of practice questions that you can have a go at, and you can take videos of yourself making a response to that video question, and you can do this as often as you wish. So you can get used to using your laptop and hearing yourself recorded and watching yourself on film. It's always going to be a bit funny and a bit uncomfortable at first, but you'll get used to it. When we don't give you just 3 chances and then you have to do a live take, that would be mean. So like I say, you have unlimited opportunity to practice before you do your questions for real.
I think each practice session gives you 2 questions, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk now about the kind of questions that we're going to be asking you. And as you can see here, it says 5 questions. Now it's worth mentioning up front, 4 of these are going to be video based and just 1 is going to be written. So for the video questions, everybody who applies to the MBA is going to have to answer the same 2 video questions. One is me asking the question, and the other is Amy asking the question. And as an MBA candidate, you should be able to predict the kind of questions that we are going to want to ask everybody who applies. So without giving too much away, you know why you're wanting to apply for an MBA, and you know why you find Oxford University potentially quite an attractive place to come and study. So the mandatory questions that we ask all of our candidates shouldn't come as any kind of surprise to you if you're a serious MBA candidate. The other 2 video questions are examples of the kind of questions that we will ask you should we invite you to interview. So they take the form very much of tell me about a time when ... or imagine yourself in this scenario, how would you ... So they're really just designed to see how you think on your feet. These are not questions where there are absolutely right and wrong answers at all. They just give us the chance to meet you and hear your thoughts as to how you would tackle that scenario, or tell us about a time when you experienced that scenario in your life. or maybe at work, and what you did, what action you took. Like I say, it's just an opportunity for us to meet you, hear you articulate your answers, and meet you in that virtual sense, and just see how you think on your feet. But this is not a tool that we're using to decide whether to make offers of admission to the programme or not. This is purely just part of the application process. So the questions are fairly similar to the questions that we will be asking you if we then take you on the next step, which is to invite you for interview. In terms of advice that we'd give you around how best to prepare, like I say, I don't think you'll find any of these questions particularly stunningly challenging or unexpected. The written questions are just designed to be quite fun, because that's more about just seeing how you write and articulate yourself on virtual paper, if you like. So the written questions aren't even really that focused on the MBA. They're much more focused on you as an individual. So a bit more light-hearted and fun. But generally, nothing to worry about with the video. It's very common technology, and like I say, used by both business schools and employers increasingly around the world. So let's move on now.
Okay. So really, really wanted to speak to you about how you can strengthen your application. And I think, you know, the things I'm going to talk about here are really things that, for me, I think straddle the whole application. So when you think about the career goals section that Charlotte spoke about, the supporting statement and the online assessment, this is where you can look to bring out these attributes. So these are the kind of attributes that we are looking for to potentially make a strong application, alongside obviously the very you know, the factual information that we have around your GMAT or your GRE or your academic achievements, or the other further postgraduate qualifications you have, or your IT skills, or the languages you speak, for example. They're very factual things we could look at. This is where your application really can come into its own in terms of really strengthening your case. So we'll obviously be coming on to the questions shortly, but there's quite a lot of questions around kind of GPA and whether GMAT makes your application stronger. Of course, those things, you know, strong GMATs, strong GRE scores, a really strong GPA will help you, absolutely. But these are the things which might be the differentiators that could really make you stand out, potentially for funding or scholarship opportunities, or potentially just as somebody that we absolutely, the committee is 110% decided on. And when I talk about that admissions committee and really this strengthening of the application process, this is where I would really stress the holistic approach that we take here at Said. And this is very much a case of a group of probably close to 10 people sat in a room, both for the review of the application before you get invited to interview and post the interview process as well. So it's a very timely process, it's very thorough, and people definitely get you know, fair time to be considered by that whole committee. I'm sure many of you would love to be a fly on the wall of that process, but I really do want to stress that we are not a school that is slicing and dicing a database or an Excel spreadsheet in order to decide who we will admit. It's a very, very thorough process. So I think, you know, let's start with awareness. I think when we talk about awareness, let's think about the career plan. Are you self-aware? Are you aware? We're obviously looking for people with lofty goals and big career aspirations. This is Oxford. You're coming to do an MBA. You're somebody who's typically should be a high achiever and somebody who's looking to achieve highly in your life. But are you also self-aware of whether what you're looking to do is realistic within the realms of the skills that you have, the skills that you'll be able to gain during the MBA, and whether you'll be able to execute that plan? So I think that's where awareness for me really, really does come in. Moving on to leadership, you don't need to have leadership experience to come to an MBA, but we are absolutely, definitely looking for leadership potential. And I would suggest here, from speaking with my colleagues in the Career Development Centre, this is probably one of the very key things that a lot of the most competitive employers are looking for. So if you think of many of the competitive, maybe finance, consulting, and big, large tech giants, leadership potential is absolutely critical. So showing that you have maybe the skills to take on leadership in the future, maybe you've been exposed to leading projects, maybe you've been given a lot of autonomy in your current role. There are many ways in which you can show that you are somebody that when things get tough, when you're left to really sort of take responsibility and potentially guide other people, even if you don't have proven years of experience, that you can really do that. So, and I think you can do this probably through the scenario questions that you will get in the online assessment, potentially in your CV, and also again in the career goals section. Communication, I think this is the reason that the online assessment is a brilliant tool. Personally, we were just talking earlier, Charlotte loves hosting webinars. I do, of course, love hosting webinars, but I much prefer being at our sort of information events and open days where I can be in front of someone to communicate. And this is why I think the online assessment is great, because a lot of the time we are looking at quite a lot of reams of paper when we have, obviously we look at it online, we don't print them out these days, but we are looking at lots and lots of information in black and white. And the online assessment, I think, is going to be an absolutely perfect tool for us to really start to see people's personalities, their interpersonal skills. We'll get to see you, smile on screen. We'll get to see if you're nervous, and we'll start to get to know who you are and get to communicate with you. So I think really the online assessment, be really thinking about showing your communication skills there. Equally, everybody communicates in a very, very different way. We have people coming to the program that are extreme extroverts and we have extreme introverts. That is fine, but it's all about how you communicate, and ultimately could you work with a team of people, which I think probably brings me on to teamwork. So teamwork in the MBA is absolutely paramount to your experience and to your success on the program. There'll be times where you will be sat in the exam halls in Oxford, in the traditional Oxford gowns. Yes, that does happen. And there will be times when you'll be working on many an individual assessment and essay, but there will be more times than you've probably ever experienced in your life where you will be thrust into a team, where you're working with people from different backgrounds, people from parts of the world where you might have never met somebody from before, you have no understanding of what their work is, and you will have to get an assessment or a project done. And I think there's so many ways through your application that you can show that you are somebody that can thrive and survive and work in a team. And actually, that doesn't always have to be a good team environment. I think there could be examples in the scenario questions where we might ask you about when something hasn't been great in a team. And that's fine. This is life. Things do not always go perfectly in teams, and it will not always be perfect on your MBA. But are you somebody that can get on with other people and can make it happen when you really, really need to do that? So hopefully that gives you some ideas there. And finally, sort of career vision. I talked about it a bit there in the awareness piece, but I think this also comes into the online assessment. Potentially, Charlotte alluded to those first two questions that everybody will get. I would suggest they are motivational based. And I think for many of you at this stage of the process, perhaps the career goal that you have at the end of your MBA is one of the big things that's driving you towards an MBA. Your future career aspirations are, largely speaking, one of the biggest reasons for why you consider an MBA, be that to accelerate your career in the industry you work in, to completely pivot and do something different, to go back to your family business and maybe take that somewhere else in the world, or expand it, or take it on from your parents or the earlier generations. Or if you're looking to completely move from being in an organization to creating your own startup, that's all around career vision. And I think if you look to make an application where you cannot explain to us in some way what that looks like, then I think your application will fall down. Because I think, yes, everybody might be coming to strengthen their leadership skills and to have a great experience and to get a master's degree from Oxford. We know that you're looking to do those things, but it has to be tied to those professional aspirations that you potentially have. So hopefully that gives you sort of a few ideas just in terms of how to kind of really start to think about your application beyond how many words is my CV, does it fit onto one page, and do I have a good GMAT score? This is really about the strength of an application. I think when I interview people, will come down to that purpose of your application and what you really want to get out of this experience. So hopefully that leaves you all a bit pumped up to go and start your application on the 1st of August. So so just a few ideas just there for like next steps for you. But I think with that, we will start to turn over to the questions. So right, we'll go from the top. So, okay, so just briefly here at the beginning, obviously I was talking about the MBA and maybe the fact that the average years of experience and whether you might choose an MBA or an EMBA, being the executive MBA. For the person asking here, I would say that comes down to leadership experience, and for the executive MBA, it's quite a senior program here at Oxford with an average years of 15 years work experience. You do need to have at least 5 years of leadership experience. Happy to direct you through to that team if you'd like to discuss in more detail. At the end of the webinar, we will leave our MBA recruitment inbox address so you can send through any inquiries.
The question here about cumulative grade point average and what the average is for an incoming applicant, well, that really depends where you've studied, because for some countries, degrees might be awarded on one scale, and from other countries, degrees might be awarded on a completely different scale. So by and large, we encourage people to apply whose degree is broadly in line with a UK 2-1 or upper second class. If you study in the States, for example, we'd be looking for a GPA of at least, say, 3.5, just to give you a rough guide. But as I mentioned earlier, we do the conversion when you apply.
Somebody asking if scholarships are only available for stage 1 or stage 2. They are available up until stage 3, so up until the January deadline.
Yeah. Okay, question here about GMAT and whether having a GMAT score above the median will give you a better chance. In short, probably not. As Amy said, we do take a very holistic approach. Now, if everything else about your application is stellar and you're sitting on a 740 and you want to work in strategy consulting and you are extremely well networked within that sector and doing all of the right things professionally to date, then of course, given that employers in that sector are quite interested in your GMAT, then having a score that chimes with that is great. But generally speaking, having just a very strong GMAT, if the rest of your application doesn't really stack up, then we're not likely to admit someone just because they've got a great GMAT. It has to be part of a compelling story. Of course, the stronger your GMAT, the more it tells us about your current abilities and how well balanced and well rounded those are, which is great. But it's not literally a way that you can compensate for weakness in a lot of the rest of your profile. If your degree was on the weaker side, but maybe you graduated many years ago, we are not necessarily going to hold a poor degree performance against you for the rest of your life. So let's say you're sitting on a GPA of 3.1, let's say, but you've got a 750 GMAT that you took 2 weeks ago and you've been doing great things professionally and your aspiration and ambition really stacks up, then of course that is really going to help you and to show us that this is what this person is capable of now, and X years ago clearly they were at a very different place in their academic life.
And there's a couple of questions here from people who maybe haven't got the upper second class or around that kind of GPA that we're ideally looking for. And so, we would still suggest you go ahead and apply, but perhaps you would look to try and gain a more competitive GMAT or GRE score. Certainly factually in terms of academics, if if you think about the sort of GMAT GRE in one hand and you think about your undergraduate in the other, the two in many ways need to balance out. So if you have a lower GPA, then having a higher GMAT or GRE will help you,
Can
and
really
vice
help.
versa.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. There's a good question here actually about the GMAT. Someone is saying, can I upload my provisional results, my preliminary results? Yes, if you've only recently taken your test, and certainly with the GMAT, you get your provisional results on the day. So please upload your, what they call the test taker's copy of your score report. So whether you're GRE or GMAT, you absolutely have to upload your score report. You also have to register us as an institution that you would like to have access to your official results. We will then do our due diligence. We speak to Pearson or we speak to ETS. Well, I say speak to, it's all online these days, but we will check your official scores with those awarding bodies as part of assessing your application. So you will be uploading a PDF of your GMAT or GRE results when you apply. That's absolutely normal.
a question here around how much we then look into the different elements of the GMAT. So potentially if we were talking about the verbal and quant or the integrated reasoning section, I would suggest that we are looking more at the overall score. Clearly, if your career goals, I'll give two maybe quite broad examples here. Let's just say you are looking to go into private equity or investment banking and aren't from that background, then we would probably look for you to have, you know, a strong quant score. Or let's just say you're somebody coming from a very liberal arts background and you had an incredible, so your degree is a very arts focused undergraduate and you have a very low quant score and your degree is also, you know, from a very liberal background, then that might be where we would look a little bit more into the different elements, if that gives you a guide.
Yeah, so. Absolutely agree. I think verbal and quant, that's where we're looking for broad balance. In terms of AWA and IR, yes, sorry, that's analytical writing and integrated reasoning. Useful, but generally quant and verbal is where we're going to be casting our eye, and as Amy says, at that total mark as well.
A question here, is there a word limit on the career vision section? There isn't a word limit. I would suggest when reading applications, it's typically around 4 or 5 questions that we ask you in the career vision section. And I would say that this equates to sometimes 3 sides of A4, 2 to 3 sides of A4, but that's sort of quite centralized over. So it's not, it wouldn't be as much as a half a page of A4 per question. It could be a couple of bullet points. It could be not a couple of bullet points, a couple of paragraphs, I would say, in length on average.
And it's worth mentioning actually on the application with the careers section, the first question it asks you is about, well, what type of professional future are you seeing for yourself? Is it employment, or is it entrepreneurship, or is it something else? And depending on which option you choose there, you will see slightly different questions unfold. So it could be that for employment, that there are naturally going to be more questions asked, so your answer is going to be that much longer, whereas maybe for entrepreneurship less so, or other, if you're perhaps taking over a family business, it might be a slightly different duration for your response.
A question around the video assessment is, will we be able to record our video responses separately and then upload at a later time before the deadline?
Yeah, so the way it works is that during the MBA application form, you see the link, you click on that, and then you'll get your login credentials from the online assessment provider, the video assessment provider. Now, you can practice and take your video responses whenever it suits you. So you're doing that outside of the MBA application system, if you like. So you can finish off your MBA application, but you will then also need to make sure you finish off your video answers and make sure that everything is submitted by the MBA application deadline. So you don't literally have to stop your MBA application halfway through, do all your video stuff, and then carry on with your MBA application form.
Okay, so another good question. Oh, there's a good question around how long you have to answer. What is the time limit per question for the video questions?
I think most of them it's going to be about 1.5 minutes, something like that. So we're not going to make you pontificate for hours. It should be, they're the kind of questions where you will be able to bring a scenario to mind pretty quickly. And I think when you're applying for an MBA, you should be able to acquit yourself pretty well with giving us a response in the allotted time. So these are durations that the schools generally use.
There's actually a little countdown clicker. So when you've actually started the question, you effectively would, let's just say you see Charlotte's face come up. There's a little countdown before the question actually will go live. And then you will start to then speak. So you've got a little bit of thinking time, a bit like when you're in an interview and you're sort of slightly thinking about what you want to say. And we had a test session for several hours last week as a team, and it's really, really simple and effective to use. So we cannot see that people are going to have too many issues or challenges with this. So somebody asking what is the range of GMAT score we have in recent cohorts. I think for this current cohort, it ranges from 620 to 790.
Yeah.
So you can see it's a really, really very broad range. I would suggest the person with the 620 potentially had something else that was super interesting and really, really stood out to us, and probably would have had quite a strong undergraduate grade to have counteracted that 620. Clearly someone with a 790 has, exceptional at standardized testing. So for the recommendations, do they have to come from your current manager or employer?
No, as I said earlier, it's absolutely fine. If you do use your line manager, that's great, but we're much more interested in someone who can write a nice reference for you, a good long reference that's detailed and really shows us that they know you, rather than just someone who's senior but really doesn't know a great deal about you. Could be your line manager, could be a peer, could be a colleague, could be a client. So it could be someone that you work with externally.
Somebody's saying, have we done away with the career goals written essay? So just to clarify, the career vision section is a written part of the application. So it's not part of the online assessment, it's part of the application form. So that is still there, very much still there. Okay, just trying, we've got about 3 minutes left, so just trying to pick up some good questions that will benefit everybody here. With regard to the video questions, must this be completed in one sitting?
Right, so you'll get plenty of time to practice, but when you say to the system, I'm now ready to see my actual real questions and do my live take, you get the one chance to do your real questions and your live take. That is done in one sitting.
Somebody asking here about scholarships. So I saw a couple of questions here around scholarships. So around, are there certain elements of your application that can obviously help you? So I think having strong academics are definitely great benefits. And obviously then us really, viewing your online assessment as a strong element of your application and your career vision. Ultimately, if you're invited to interview, we obviously really quite like you. And so therefore, I would say that the candidates that get offered scholarship will be those that then perform really well at interview. And overall, we feel are sort of sitting in that, perhaps we would say, sort of upper quartile of candidates. So it's a very, very holistic view. I think you could say that most people are being awarded scholarship would have academics that would sit around the GPA requirements and would probably have a GMAT or GRE that sits around that median that we saw on one of those earlier slides, complemented with many other elements as well. We've got quite a few quite specific questions here. I'm going to share in the chat box the MBA inquiry inbox where you can put through your individual questions. I'm just looking for a couple of really good questions that benefit everybody here. Obviously, we have the 1+1 programme. That's where you study a master's in Oxford in the first year and an MBA in the second. We will have specific 1+1 webinars coming up. But to answer this question, if you do not get acceptance into the joint programmes, it is possible to still get admission into just the MBA. Let's have one more to finish up, Charlotte. Sorry, we've got a few spam ones coming through here.
Yeah, do excuse us while we're just quickly scrolling through till we can find a proper question that we can share with all of you that might be useful for more than just the question asker, as it were. Someone's asking about scholarships and whether January is realistically too late. Well, no, January is the deadline for the scholarships. So if you apply under the January deadline, you'll definitely still be considered. That is the university's scholarship application deadline.
And just one question here, somebody asking, does having a professional degree pose an added advantage for applicants? So I would say anything that is a professional or postgraduate qualification, it absolutely adds to who you are. It will add to your application. It's not a requirement, but things such as, let's just say you work in finance and you have a CFA, then absolutely that is part of your journey and part of your story. And many people would deem to that's something very worthy if you're working in that field. So something that is specific to you, your story, your journey, absolutely. Don't think that right now you have to go out and start seeking other qualifications to add to your resume that are going to just strengthen your profile for the sake of it. An MBA application is absolutely about being you, being open, being honest, and showing us who you are. And we will take you very much at face value for who you are, given the openness that we have to profiles and bringing a diverse cohort to Oxford. With that, I think that brings us to quite a nice close at 3 p.m.
Perfect message to finish on, I think.
I'm just going to add in here our inquiries inbox, where you can send through any specific individual queries. I'm just going to stay online for a couple minutes longer just to answer a couple of good questions that we couldn't answer to the whole audience. You should be able to see that coming up there. It's MBA-recruitment at sbs.ox.ac.uk. Again, please do look out for events, further webinars coming up. Our final piece of advice would be to open your application on the 1st of August or closely after. We do not judge you for how long you have that open for, so you could have that open until, let's just say you're not applying till stage 3. Absolutely fine to have that open for several months. We wish you the absolute best of luck, and we hope to meet you either on the road or here in Oxford,
or maybe as an interview,
So best of luck, and either way, myself and Charlotte will you'll potentially get to meet us on the Kira talent system. So thank you very much for dialing in, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye.